What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan. I'm here with my co-host Dave Martinson. And Dave, before we start, I just want to give a shout out to someone with your likeness, with your namesake, I should say, Mr. David Price, for helping the Red Sox bring it home for the fourth time in my lifetime last night. World Series champions. I told you I wouldn't go too much into it, though, because I have a lot of respect for you. So we'll move on. But I'm very happy about that. We got lots to talk about today on Nowstalgia Pod. We got a little TV, a little Netflix talk. We got 4 different albums, very different albums to be talking about. And then we got Mid90s, which I'm actually really pumped to talk about. That was quite the movie-going experience for me last night. I have an interesting story to mention from it, but let's start off. It's Halloween coming up, so when you're listening to this, it's either the day before or the day of Halloween, most likely, maybe the week of. But it was Halloween weekend this past weekend. And Dave, you went all out this year for your costume. You even ordered something off Amazon to make sure you looked like this guy who we'll probably be talking about sometime next week.
Like?
Who did you go as?
Freddie Mercury.
One
of the two goats, specifically 1985, 86 Wembley Stadium outfit. Yeah. I bought a jacket inadvertently from Pakistan. Didn't realize I was buying it from Asia.
Interesting.
I shipped it across the land, all across the world.
had that yellow jacket. Did people know who you were?
Yeah, some people did. One person asked me if I was Michael Jackson, and I was like, I guess I get the idea, But
colorful jacket, like a Thriller jacket.
I don't know, like white pants. David Bowie, I guess, could have came to mind too. But yeah, once I was like, oh, just Google Freddie Mercury, and because it's like the second result you see is that outfit. So
yeah, pretty iconic. Glad to hear that. I went as Bruce Springsteen. A couple people got it, a couple people didn't. But I wanted to go as a very easy costume, and throwing a bandana on and wearing jeans and a white t-shirt was really nice for Halloween weekend. So shout out to Julianne, friend of the pod, giving her that shout out. She went as Madonna from the 80s, and she actually killed it. I was really impressed with her costume. So
people got it.
What?
People got it.
We got on the train to go into the city, and the first person that sat down was like, "Oh, Madonna," and Julianne just like lit up. She's like, "Yeah," I was like, "Yep, she's Halloween made right there." So, I have been in the Halloween spirit this past weekend though, because I've been watching a lot of The Haunting of Hill House, this show on Netflix that's been breaking out over the last couple of weeks. It dropped, I think it was October 12th or around there, and it's Mike Flanagan's. I think it's his first show for Netflix. And it's based off this 1959 novel by Shirley Jackson. It's pretty loosely based, but it's been really intriguing. I'm not really big into scary shows. I don't watch American Horror Story. I think I only watched like 2/3 of the first season or something like that, and it really wasn't for me. But I actually had a friend from my last job say, "Oh, even if you don't like scary shows, you'll really like this as like a mental health professional." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." So I checked it out. And there is a big mental health element into it, but mostly just like family dynamics and the interplay between families. But it's a really well done, spooky show. Probably the best one I've ever watched. And that's not saying a lot. Like I said, I don't watch a lot of them. I think I find it really intriguing, though, because they really flesh out characters. I think in scary movies, a lot of times they forego talking about stories and talking about characters and really fleshing those out. And they just kind of go more for, I don't know, whatever the big bad ghost or paranormal thing is at the end that's going to bring the big scare, and they lose a lot of substance for the cheap scares. And that's kind of why Get Out was so great, was it really had like an awesome backstory and it really fleshed out different characters. And I think this does, it's not on the level of Get Out, obviously, but really well done for a Netflix show. It's a great surprise. Only 10 episodes, even though they are an hour long, so it takes a big chunk of time. I have a feeling you won't be watching it, but if you do want to spook yourself a little bit, highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, I don't have any interest in actually watching it, but yet another genre that Netflix is tackling, horror.
Mm-hmm.
Horror is really financially viable at the movies right now. Halloween, Quiet Place, all the Conjuring movies, everything Blumhouse makes, everything's super profitable, right? But horror on TV, still a little bit of an untapped well. American Horror Story, even though it's critically fallen off a cliff. It's still very popular. A lot of people really like it, but other than that, there hasn't really been anything that consistent. There's a lot of one-off things, maybe like limited series or like specials, but I think this it makes sense to try and do something prestige-esque in that space. And once again, I mean, Netflix has proven time and time again that they are, not allergic to anything. They will try any kind of genre. They'll take over anything they can. So it seems like a no-brainer move in hindsight, and yet another win for them.
No, absolutely. And I think the really interesting thing for them is if they can either set it up where like every other year they're doing like Stranger Things and then this, and eventually Stranger Things, the problem like we've talked about in the past is going to be the kids are going to get old pretty quick, and like what do you do with the story then? I'm sure they'll figure something out, or maybe they'll just find a different property. But if they're doing like a every other year type thing where they have a short series that's spooky and Halloween themed, I think they'll be just fine. It's interesting. We talked a little bit about American Vandal a couple weeks ago, how we really enjoyed the second season. And it was announced this past week, I believe it was like Thursday or maybe Wednesday, that American Vandal was not being picked up by Netflix, is actually canceled. And the main reason for this seems to be that Netflix is moving towards more in-house productions, and American Vandal is not that. What do you think about the move, and do you see a future for American Vandal on TV, or do you think it's done?
Yeah, I think like I liked season 2, but I didn't like it as much as the first season. I thought it just was inherently less funny of a story this time around, But I still thought it was well done and still had cool ideas. But would that play on like cable? I'm not sure. I don't know if there's enough meat on the bone episode for it to be a successful week-to-week show. Probably there is. The creators endeavor for that. But I mean, would any other streaming service be psyched to pick it up? Like, I mean, Amazon Prime is probably the only real option, right?
Yeah, I can't see it fitting on HBO.
Yeah, I think like this doesn't happen that often where streaming services pick up a show that was already canceled. It's happened once in a while. Netflix has grabbed some stuff, but yeah, I mean, the weird thing, I think it's just solely about Netflix's ability to control the property. Like you said, I mean, creators will be shopping it because they control the show. It's not Netflix's show; they're just distributing it, right? So they would prefer to just control everything, right? Just affects the bottom line better. But it's on the other hand, it's like, is American Vandal that expensive to make? Or
yeah, I can't imagine it.
But it's like it's just stuff that like we don't really have any like insight on understanding. Is because first of all, they don't publicize their ratings at all. We just kind of have like big score guesses, right? And then also, we don't understand how like the quote real estate works. Netflix, like, yeah, sure, you can put as much shit on you want as there, but they still want to curate it. So, a show like this is really successful for them. If they still want to cancel it because they don't fully control it, that really says a lot about how they're operating. It's tough to make a declarative statement from it, but I'd like to see it continue for sure. But disappointing development, no doubt.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing, and I think it could be picked up by somewhere like Hulu as well, somewhere that just kind of wants to have it as like a property. I think Hulu is kind of trying to figure out how they're going to build themselves out moving forward. It's not a bad thing for them to say, we'll throw a little bit of money here and have it on our platform. Kind of same for Amazon Prime. Just having it in their library, I think in the long run is their goal. But yeah, it's definitely disappointing. And Netflix, I think, especially with Disney streaming on the horizon, and probably a lot more other streaming platforms to follow after that. It makes sense that they're moving more towards this is our property because they know eventually they're all going to become very specialized and individual. So it's something to keep track of, and something we'll definitely be talking about more. Any last thoughts before we move on to some music?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of following in the wake of consecutive weeks Iron Fist and Luke Cage were canceled. Also shows that they were Netflix shows, but they were not fully controlled by Netflix. They are still produced by Marvel Television. So it's kind of the same idea. American Vandal, though, was just a less obvious candidate for this, like everyone knows Marvel's those shows, but yeah, American Vandal. I mean, this is, again, it's kind of like how Brooklyn Nine-Nine was canceled by Fox. same shit. Now NBC was willing to, pick it up and take it over, but American Vandal, if it went to Amazon, will Amazon want to acquire a new show that they still won't be owning? Like you said, they'd have to be willing to just pay up just to have it in the coffers for the time being, So
Mhm.
As we continue to spread everything around, as everyone's making their own service, this is kind of stuff that's going to happen where, frankly, shows just aren't going to be made like this anymore. They're going to be made by where you're living. So,
Well, and I think that's actually a really interesting point, and kind of brings me to something Andy Greenwald mentioned on The Watch. Was he thinks Michael Schur is a name to watch for Netflix to kind of go all in on, and I think that's going to be really the next move, is how these creators and these showrunners are just going to be given these huge contracts to say content for our streaming service, for our brand moving forward. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting. It's almost like, do you invest in like the streaming service that has the most people that you like that have created things in the past? Like it's going to be an interesting portion to the debate moving forward, and really interesting. I mean, there's a lot there. We'll get into it a little bit more in depth some other time, because we got a lot to cover today. Let's jump to Joji. Ballads 1. I mean, you want to talk about someone that reminds me of Rich Brian, just in terms of as a creator, and obviously I think as a cultural person, an Asian person, of course, as well. But the fact that he was a YouTube star as well, and then has become this like serious music, I don't know, creator. It's pretty impressive. And I kind of went in blind to this, didn't really know who he was beforehand. I left, I think, same as Rich Brian, pleasantly surprised. Like, there was a lot there that I liked. I don't think it was a perfect album by any stretch, but there's enough left intrigued about Joji's future. Initial thoughts on Ballads 1, then let's talk a little bit deeper on it.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in the same boat. I wasn't his real name is George Miller. He used to be just a YouTube guy. Kind of got the Harlem Shake craze going. And he was Filthy Frank / the Pink guy, and he released some music, but I wasn't really familiar until he got on 88 Ride, when he released In Tongues. That was his first project under the Joji name. And then I started seeing him on all those features, Rich Brian songs, the Rising album we reviewed earlier this year. And, I was like, all right, yeah, there's definitely something here with this dude. And then Ballads 1 comes out, and I'm like, yeah, do I like every song on this? No. But he definitely, like, even the songs that don't totally hit, I feel like there's like cool concepts, cool ideas on here, in terms of like a spacey R&B singer,
Yeah.
So it's definitely cool.
In a way, I almost like when Cuddy tries to sing, I hear like a lot of that type of vibe, very like spacey, cold synths, kind of lo-fi almost in a way. And I think he does a really nice job of using his voice differently. It's almost kind of like he's still trying to find like what's the right like lane for him in terms of singing, because he can go kind of high pitched at times, but I think where he actually achieves the most on this and makes the best music is when he actually is lower and just kind of blends in with the beats. Like Yeah Right or XXNX, I thought were two great examples of that, or even Slow Dancing in the Dark. It was also another one where he kind of blends in with the sound, and he's not trying to let his voice carry it. I mean, I think there's a lot there. He had Thundercat helping him out with this on Can't Get Over You, which I was really impressed with. So I think he has a lot of potential. I think that the lack of substance in some of these songs, really not a lot to say, I think, yet. And also just the fact that he is still kind of trying to find the right footing for himself. Yeah, makes this probably in the end forgettable, but a good start nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree. I think like a song like Test Drive, for example, is one of the singles. You listen to it, you watch that video, and you're like, I mean, I get the idea, but it doesn't fully come together. It's like it's inherently half baked. It's like half a song idea.
Yeah.
The fact that he even has half the idea is still cool. That's still a lot of people, especially in the space he's in. I think my favorite song was No Fun. I mean, a lot of Peach Jam from the 88 Rising album. Just more like an upbeat. He's like really actually like coherent and not blending in with the beat on that. I think because it was one of the few moments on the album where he did that. I think it really stood out to me.
Mm-hmm.
But then he can make a song like "Slow Dancing in the Dark," which is completely different and
Yep.
also cool. And I think that song's really good as well. So yeah, I think Joji, definitely not the most traditional path to becoming an artist, but becoming more and more viable every release. So it's definitely a guy to watch.
Definitely someone to watch, and someone that I think we've been watching a little bit, at least from a distance, has been Mick Jenkins. He dropped this second album, Pieces of a Man, debut, The Healing Component. He's dropped a couple of EPs in that time. Um, Give us a little bit of background on Mick. I mean, he's obviously another Chicago rapper, but who is this guy?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of it. He really busted out with the EP called "The Waters" and and Waves,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, the Chicago scene is already really buzzing, but he kind of stood out as like a real storyteller. He has like a more bassier, lower register, and he kind of just sounds like wiser beyond his years. He's not like making ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
but even for a lyrical artist, he does sound like older and like wiser, I guess you could say, right? And obviously, judging from where he's from, he started popping up on other tracks with Saba, Chance, all those guys, right? So just
Mm-hmm.
debating in that space. He's actually on a really good Chance song, "Grown Ass Kid," the
Mm-hmm.
Unreal Coloring Book song. He's one of the featured verses on that. Uh, but then the Healing Component, his debut album, comes out. And it's kind of disappointing. It's like overly dense, just kind of hard to get into. Like, yeah, he's trying to tell a lot of stories, but it just didn't totally work for me. It was tough to really take any songs away from it. So I was really looking forward to the follow up because I know the talent's there, and I think this definitely was a much better result for sure. But what was your take for someone who was less familiar with him going in?
Yeah, I kind of saw him as like an in between I don't know, like Saba and Vic Mensa and Chance. Like I found him kind of within that spectrum. I feel like he's a little more soulful than like Vic. And he definitely brings it out in his music. Um, but really, I think we've listened to so much Chicago rap this year that I was just kind of was like, oh, I know this. This sounds very familiar for this year. Reminded me a lot of No Name, where I felt like it was pretty consistent through, but nothing really jumped out too much. But overall, just kind of quality. I don't know. I guess like Padded Locks was probably my favorite with Ghostface.
That was
But yeah, I guess and Understood I liked a lot near the end. Soft Porn I also found myself bobbing my head too. So there was a couple songs that really caught me, but overall, just like yeah, this is quality. It's Chicago right now. This is the sound. So um, I think what I find most I don't know interesting about it is I do think a lot of these Chicago rappers have a very similar sound at the moment, and you know, Chance's album has to be upcoming. I mean, it's been what almost 2 years since Coloring Book, over 2 years.
over 2 years now, yeah.
So you have to think there's an album coming. I wonder if Chance is going to try to do something different, or if he's going to continue to lean into this sound. Because I feel like I don't think he like revolutionized the sound, but he definitely popularized it. And I think if anyone's going to kind of move Chicago sound in a different direction, it's going to be him. But I know it's rooted in jazz and all that from a time before. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because like you think about these guys and like who did we review? We reviewed Tokyo, Saba, No Name. We didn't review Joy Perp, and now we're reviewing Mick, and Smino's coming out in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And Smino in particular is one who sounds the most like Chance, right? But then Mick, I mean, vocally, he's nothing like Chance, right? But it's the production,
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
jazz, that soulful influence. And I don't know if they're going to go away from that because I think it really works for them. And also because doesn't sound like mainstream hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
it's inherently a good thing. So even if you're going to maybe uh, go over old ground that you've been doing, it's still different than what other people make.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
true.
interesting. I don't know if there's a lot of urgency to really switch up the sound like that, but I think all of these artists continuing to just grow as artists grow lyrically. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like Mick's a guy who presents himself as really lyrically, really into songwriting. That doesn't mean every song he makes is anything special, nor is all the lyrics actually good. I mean, just because you try
Mhm.
and be lyrical doesn't mean you get a pass when it doesn't totally work. And that was kind of my healing component. So I think just having everyone get better, like Joey Purp, we didn't talk about Quarter Thing. I think I was away when it came out, but that was an album that I feel like Joey Purp actually kind of took a step back. He got less unique because he started sounding more homogenous, but not in a good way, not in a Chicago way. So I think these artists, Chance is kind of his own case because he's so famous. He's so much bigger and
Mhm.
wealthier than everyone else from Chicago. But like Vic is also interesting because he's gets so much shit online for all the stuff he does. But I think the more underground guys like Tokyo and Mick and Saba, like I think they just need to work on maybe consistency more than worrying about changing up the sound. But it's an interesting thought.
Mhm. Definitely interesting. Like you said, this is definitely a better showing for Mick than his first album, and there's growth. So hopefully he continues to grow, and hopefully he can continue to bring Chicago rap. Because I think even though I'm saying I wonder if there's going to be a switch up anytime soon, it is probably my favorite style of rap right now. Like I find it the most artistic and most pleasurable to listen to. Hopefully he can find that middle ground of storytelling. But why don't we jump to Boygenius real quick? They only released an EP. This is relatively new, well, a brand new band actually, made up of Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers, and Lucy Dacus. Now, I don't think we've talked about any of them except for maybe I mentioned Julian Baker last year during our best of episode. Just that her album "Turn Out the Lights" was an honorable mention for me for the year. Really great album. Kind of chilly sounding in parts, and Spacey gave a lot of room to breathe, but her vocals took it home, and she's an amazing songwriter. And that's kind of I think that's kind of the appeal of these three, is that very dick, but they all kind of talk about a lot of the same things, but very directly. Like they don't really pull punches in their lyrics. And I think you can kind of hear that on this record. Before we jump into it, I think an important thing to bring up with this is that they're going on tour together, all three of them. And they created this band as almost like a slight to critics in the industry. Oh, you basically put women in indie rock in their own category and don't see us as individuals. Just like, oh, it's women in indie rock. Game is boy genius, but like girl genius or woman genius. Like, so this is inherently supposed to. I think the point of the album in a lot of ways is to kind of bring that to light and about that to critics. So you really like this album, because I think that there's enough here that's different from most indie rock that you probably left saying, "Oh, I like this a lot." Am I right?
Yeah, I'm very predictable when it comes to modern rock music. Yeah, I think the songwriting, like you said, really impressive. Those three as solo artists, they're all their calling cards, right? I think now, I think 3 of these songs were already released before the EP dropped, so it's pretty small offering. And I think a lot of these songs, they almost don't quite sound like collaborative songs. They sound more like, all right, here's the Julian Baker song. Maybe the other two are in the back, so I think it's, if anything, a really great proof of concept for what these 3 could definitely make if they were interested in making a full-length project. Regardless, what they do have here, I think, is pretty cool. I think "Stay Down" in particular, I really liked. I think that's one of the singles already out, but it's the first time I was hearing it, and I think the whole thing, like the whole meta thing with the title. I mean, the women of indie rock. I mean, we reviewed Snail Mail earlier this year. Same thing. It's the women of indie rock are the ones making the best indie rock. So rather than just use labels, just say it how it is. They're the ones at the top right now, so they deserve that respect. They should not be lumped together. And again, I'm not super familiar with these artists, but I can see that off this. So it's I think any rock fan, it's a must listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you're saying about how it doesn't sound totally cohesive. I think the only song on the whole album, and it's kind of the centerpiece, is "Salt in the Wound." Is probably their most collaborative sounding song where you can tell that they're all working together, and it doesn't sound like, oh, this is Phoebe's turn or this is Lucy's turn. They showed a lot of chemistry on this, and I wish this was more than probably just a side project and maybe touring together will propel that forward if they really like working together. And it seems like they have a lot of shared interests, but there's a lot of potential here. And not only is the songwriting great, but I thought the structure and the production of this was just phenomenal. Especially on a song like Salt in the Wound or Stay Down, you can really hear like it's very crisp sounding. The instruments are played almost perfectly. Like there's a lot to like here. So like you said, if you're a rock fan of any sort, and especially indie rock, you got to be checking these gals out
for sure.
Let's jump to another gal that I think has definitely been checked out before and is very famous, Robyn, our Swedish pop savior, I guess, in a way. I don't know. It's interesting to think about Robyn because I know she's been famous for what, like 20 years now, over that 25 almost.
She's in her late
crazy
30s.
And and she started what, 95 was her first album, 97.
The way she carried her career, she was kind of like the iconoclast version of Britney Spears. She like shied away from and didn't want to do the big label deals and stuff, right? And she kind of just went on her own way. And I actually wasn't really familiar with her music, from the time. I think that's partly because she inherently moved away from making mainstream pop music, alternative pop, right? So it's interesting because she's really famous, but also like people's exposure to her, I think, really depends on like how old you were, like where you were when she was making and what kind of music she was making. It's a really interesting career. But it's like her first album in what, 8 years, I think.
Yeah, first solo album in 8 years. She's released a couple EPs and been featured a couple times. It's interesting because I know some of the songs like Dancing on My Own, Show Me Love, which was her first like real hit back in the late 90s, and Call Your Girlfriend. I'd heard all those before, but I never had really like explored her music and like her catalog that deep, because I think this, like her pop music, like I think most pop music isn't super appealing to me all the time, and I usually only check it out if it's something that I feel like I should know for the pod or for the culture going on around me. The culture, #culture. But it's interesting to see, like you said, like she's like the polar opposite of Britney Spears, or I was thinking like Ariana Grande as some like a pop star that's released an album this year that's similar.
That would take for sure. I mean, in terms of critical reception, I think Sweetener and Honey are probably the two best pop albums of the year.
Yeah, and I think they both bring a lot of different like substance to it in different ways. Like Sweetener, I think is a more classic sort of pop album, whereas Robyn, I think, stylistically pushes herself and tries different things. I mean, this is like, it's like house, like Swedish house music mixed with like, I don't know, like synth pop. Like it definitely depends on what she's trying to say. And it also feels like her albums have an arc to it, whereas like Ariana's, it's just kind of like song here, maybe not a lot of continuity among it. So in a way, it's kind of like Robyn approaches this as more of like an artist, and I think Ariana more as like a pop star, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, again, Robyn chose not to be a pop star.
Right.
Her pop star on her own terms, right? And you see her in the music as well. So,
what do you think of Honey as an album?
Yeah, I mean, you listen, and even if it's like it's overly synthy, it's not like super like big sound or anything. It's certainly, there's no Pharrell production on here like there was in Sweetener.
Yeah.
You're listening, and even if like I couldn't get into every beat, I couldn't get into every song, I still appreciate songwriting. It's like a lot of interesting stuff going on with the heartbreak. And I mean, she actually had, I think, whenever like her close producer and longtime friend passed away, and that kind of contributed to the hiatus. So a lot of that comes out on the album. But then, I think 2/3 through, she makes like Between the Lines, which is a really upbeat song, much more electronic sounding. I know that sounded really cool too, but weird because like the album was like built up to that moment, So yeah, even though I didn't love every song, in terms of the production, but it wasn't bad production, just wasn't, my cup of tea per se. But I think the songwriting is quite strong once again. So, I think this is kind of the album she wanted to make. She didn't feel compelled to make anything during this hiatus until now. So you can definitely tell a lot of time was put into it. She didn't make any concessions.
Yeah, no, and I think I read something where she had been working on her single "Honey," and obviously the title track of the album for like years now that she's been trying to perfect it. So she puts a lot of work into this, and I think it shows. There's a lot of detail within the beats, and I actually probably thought "Honey" was my favorite song on the album, just because I felt like it was like a much warmer sound, and it kind of brought in that like 2/3 of the album where it starts to pick up, even though I think it ends. I forgot what the name of the last song is. I forgot to write it down, but kind of ends on a lower note, I felt like. But I thought like Honey, and then like the 3 songs after it, one of them was the one you said, Between the Lines, and then Missing You, I think, was also near the end. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but those were the songs that stood out to me the most. And yeah, I don't think there's anything we can really say about Robyn that's gonna blow anyone's mind. She's quality pop, and that's in an artistic way, and that's something you really can't say about a lot of pop stars at this point. So she's worth listening for anyone that likes music and just appreciates, I think, good songwriting and interesting album development. So, why don't we jump something I think we're a little bit more enthusiastic to talk about? Because I'm feeling we're a little low energy right now, Dave, and I think maybe we gotta talk about some skateboarding right now. Some Jonah Hill directed skateboarding. Mid90s, his debut film as a director. Jonah Hill sitting at 78% Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't check out the box office numbers. I can't imagine it's killing it there though.
No, I think it made like under 3 million.
Yeah.
I think like 1,000 theaters. It's doing well given the type of movie it is. But yeah, this is not gonna win any weekends or anything. It was May 24 movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which actually, I mean, when I see the A24 at the beginning of a movie, I almost feel like I know I'm gonna like it. Like I'm gonna be like, oh, this is quality,
like arousing.
Yeah. Starring Sonny Siljic, I hope I said that right. Lucas Hedges, Nikel Smith, and then Olan Prenat, Ryder McLaughlin, Gio Galatia, and Catherine Watterson kind of round out the cast. Obviously, there's a couple we didn't mention there, but I was so impressed with those first 3 in this movie. Sonny, Lucas, and Nikel. I thought all were fantastic. And it's interesting that Jonah Hill took the approach of, I'm going to find skaters and make them actors rather than the other way around, which I think is what a lot of people are talking about with this. But it was almost at points like watching a documentary, because one, these kids were that good at skateboarding, but they really made it feel like they weren't acting at all, that they were just being themselves at parts, which is, I think Lucas Hedges was actually probably the one that I was like, I least believed, only because I've seen him in so many other things, and playing this, like, I don't know, tough guy brother who's really like, I don't know, emotionally ruined underneath was kind of different, because he always plays like a very nice person, but
for sure.
Yeah. But overall, I was just blown away with the acting performances. I think that there's a couple of, I think there's a couple of things that could have been better in this film, but overall just was great. What did you think of Mid90s?
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well. It's interesting because we're in this, just by chance, this great year for skate cinema. Movie Skate Kitchen came out a few months ago. Same thing, cast real skaters. This movie about female skaters. Jane Smith is in this movie as well. I actually like that one a little bit more. We never got to talk about it, but another movie, it was very similar to Mid90s. I think there's just more narrative in that one. And then also Minding the Gap, which is a skateboarding documentary, which has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now. And now we have Mid90s, which is an A24 film. So it's like, it's a big year for skate, right? And skating. And, I think I had heard going in that the movie was indebted to Kids, and Kids was a movie that I had always had on the list and never actually watched. I watched Kids like before I saw Mid90s, like literally the day before, and having that fresh in my mind, I could definitely see some of the influences, like nothing overly copied or anything, except for the handshake scene where Sonny and the crew was like dapping everyone at the park or that like back lot they were skating at,
Yeah.
which is very much like that iconic park scene in Kids where they're all doing these extended handshakes. So that was cool to see. And Kids also takes place in the 90s. It was shot, it came out in 95. So seeing something like this, which is so indebted to the 90s design, it was a nice, cool little homage. But I think what Jonah Hill should get a lot of credit for has his directorial debut. And uh, even sidebar on that, Bradley Cooper, Paul Dano, and Jonah Hill all made the directorial debuts this year and all killed it.
Yeah.
Good year for actors becoming directors. But Jonah, he was so indebted to the 90s. This is a time where he grew up in, and you could see it. I mean, this obvious stuff, right? With the Street Fighter shirt, the CDs, the fashion.
Yeah.
But just like he didn't make any compromises with the vernacular, the conversations the kids were having, which meant not pulling punches with fucked up language that doesn't really happen anymore. So I thought that it was a smart call for authenticity's sake. But in terms of the acting, Sonny Suljic, I didn't realize it was him until I saw the trailer for like the fifth time. But he was in Killing of Sacred Deer last year, the Yorgos Lanthimos, and he also did the motion capture for the God of War PS4 game that came out back in April. So he's like 13 years old, but already slowly killing it, right? And then we talk about Lucas Hedges, we know that, but Nakel took me like 7 or 8 times seeing the trailer before I realized Nakel Smith was from fucking Odd Future, and shit blew my mind at first because I was like, I knew Knock was skateboarding and like he was like Scream and like really big on that, but I was like, oh, he's acting. This is so cool. And he was a revelation in the movie for me. I thought, again, for a role that a movie under 90 minutes long, there's not a lot of meat left on the bone, but he still made a really good impression on me as a performer. So overall, I liked it, but I do think there's some issues with it. But definitely, even for its flaws, I think it's well done throughout. So it's quite an enjoyable movie.
Yeah, Nakel Smith, his performance is so well played, and so he's basically playing like the big brother, like the dad figure for the group, and kind of he's also like the character that's like wise beyond his years. So I think
Get out the hood.
Yeah, no matter how he like played it, he had a really good role to be working with. But he did kill those like moments, like when they're just sitting and talking, and he's talking about all the issues everybody in the group has, or at the end, even like the last line when he's like, you take the hardest hits out of anyone I know. You don't have to do that, right? Like, you don't have to do that. Like the way he delivers those lines is, like I said, it's so realistic. Almost at points, I like felt like, is this just actually who this person is in real life? Like to like play it this perfectly seems like he was made to play that role. And Sonny Suljic, man, I mean, he is in the House with the Clocks in his walls, and he's in Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, which I mean is like 2 seconds. He's like when he falls out of the wheelchair at the beginning and at the end they pick him up, he's like one of those skateboarders who's like,
oh, I didn't know.
Cool. Yeah, so he's had a lot of good things going on. Very talented, and like Lucas Hedges, obviously. The whole thing with the fucking orange juice had me dying throughout. I was just like,
constant dog.
I was unbelievable. And then at the end when he gets the 2 and he shares one, which was like a really nice like way to like wrap that up, that seemed like realistic, but just like, so I was just laughing about this fucking orange juice. So why don't we talk about some of the things you felt like could have been better about it?
Yeah, I think the movie is too short. Let's just be honest. I think there's not enough narrative in the movie. And it's disappointing because you see the outline, you see the framework for everything. And I think that, if anything, this movie, despite its flaws, great sign for Jonah Hill's directorial career moving forward, because this is a script he wrote. This is his first script. And he made these choices to have it be, a tight film. So I think, with some feedback, he has a lot of great people that in his circle. So I'm sure he'll continue to improve on this. But I mean, the whole crew, right? And Nakel plays Ray, and Ray's the closest thing to a real character. But I thought all the skaters, I liked all their performances. I thought all the kids were cool. But I mean, were they really characters, or were they just kind of like archetypes? Like stoner kid, quiet kid, bad home life kid.
Mm-hmm.
Talented kid who tries kind of needs to leave his bum friends. It's like
Yep.
we never got like the backstories were interwoven smartly through dialogue throughout the film,
Mm-hmm.
but we never got anything more with that. And like Ray got close, like remember I think the scene he was talking to the pro skaters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then fuck shit fucks it up by being like a slob around him, right? Remember Nakel, the delivery, he's like, ah shit, I forgot what I was gonna say, and it was really
Yeah,
genuine.
I'm tripping right now. Like,
And I thought that scene was another great acting performance, but that was close. We got to really getting more into his character. The other ones, though, I just felt like we never really got beyond the surface. The surface was done well. I think they were fully realized initially, but we never got any further with that. And then even Lucas Hedges. I mean, his brother, what's his name? Ian.
yeah, Ian.
Um, he comes off at first as just like a bully older brother, right? And then we realize there's more underneath the surface. We don't really get that. So I
Right.
just think there were opportunities to have this movie flesh out the story a little bit more.
Mhm.
Again, I still like the movie quite a bit, but I feel like if they could have done that a little bit better, it probably would have been a better story overall.
Yeah, I think that was my overall gripe. Was I did feel like they gave like certain lines of dialogue a lot of weight to lift. Like you talk about um, how none of the like skateboard characters were really fleshed out, and I think they expected the part where Ray is explaining to Stevie about all the issues that they all have in their own lives, and then you're supposed to like piece that back together. But that's a lot of work for that dialogue to be doing, and with movies, it's always better to show and not tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of the same thing with Ian and Stevie when Ian's talking about what the mom was like when he was a kid and how she had guys coming in and out all the time, and he would hear things that really bothered him and made it hard for him. And
Kind of sounds. Fucking sounds.
Which that's the thing is that this movie, for as like it wove in a lot of different themes and like stories it wanted to tell. Like Stevie was dealing with mental health issues. Like he was self-harming throughout the movie. Him and Ian obviously were very affected by their home life. They were both looking for community. One found it, one didn't. And I think it touched on those things tastefully and did them pretty well. But in terms of fleshing out some of these things, it was really like, man, you're given a lot of weightlifting for these small parts when you have a lot of time. You could make this an hour 40 and really, I think, improve this. Any other knocks on it, or do we want to move in? Go ahead.
No, I think just to put a bow on that, the movie's more of like a vibe than a real story. It's more of that 90s vibe, that culture. The culture is captured expertly. The setting's captured really well. But the story, well, not horrible, not bad, just I think it needs a little more oomph. And not holding it against Jonah Hill at all. I still think the movie's quite enjoyable, but I think if you had these critiques as well, I would recommend seeing Skate Kitchen. I think you would be very happy with that.
I'll check it out for sure. Two other things I just wanted to shout out real quick: Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I mean, is there anyone better making scores right now for movies? I mean,
for money, dog.
Yeah, it's crazy, and the fact that that not only did they have this really successful band that's touring at the moment, but they basically get featured in these awesome movies. And I'm pretty sure they did this for very cheap if they didn't get paid at all for it. Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, and shit, I mean, the soundtrack itself was dope.
Yes, that's what I was getting to. Great mix of 90s music.
And then,
sorry, I didn't hear you. What were you saying?
No, I said a lot of good 90s music, a lot of obvious picks. You got Morrissey in there. Also, I thought, I mean, even the first frame, but it's in 4:3 aspect ratio, like the 90s, like a CRT TV. That was really cool to watch. It was shot on a Super 16 camera. It almost had like a grainy look to it. Jonah Hill really put a lot of effort into making all aspects of the film feel like that the time period. So there's a lot of cool stuff in here, even if not everything worked. And I can't wait to see what Nakel does next.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I was gonna just try to point home about the soundtrack. I thought the way that they worked in the Nirvana song, Cobain's cover of "Where Did You Sleep Last Night" was like perfect and subtle, but still like stood out. And then also Wave of Mutilation. First of all, bringing in the UK version of the single is a deep cut for sure. But then just the way that they use that to show his like, attempt to become a skater was, I thought, perfect. So a lot here to like for Jonah Hill. I have no doubt that this is just the start for him as a director. So a lot of really exciting stuff. Go see Mid90s, but sounds like Skate Kitchen might also be worth your time if you enjoy this. So we recommend both of those. What do we got next week, Dave? Let's finish it up and bring it home.
Well, speaking of Lucas Hedges, his new film Boy Erase comes out, but I believe that's in limited release during this weekend, so it won't be by us for a bit. Wildlife still isn't by us either, so that's going to be in New York and LA anyway, so we'll excited to talk about that as soon as we can. But Bohemian Rhapsody will be everywhere this weekend, talking about that. I know the reviews are not that great, but me and you are both Rami Malek fans.
Hell yeah.
And Queen fans, so I was interested in seeing it regardless, so I would like to make my own opinion.
Oh, the guy that went as Freddie Mercury wants to see the movie featuring Freddie Mercury, huh? Interesting.
Hot take, right? Bodyguard on Netflix. We didn't get to it this week, but we will be talking about the whole season next week. 6 episodes. It was the biggest new drama in BBC history. Came out in August, so we just got it over here pretty quickly. It stars Richard Madden, aka Robb Stark from Game of Thrones, who might be the next Bond. So psyched about that. The Deuce season finale is Sunday. We haven't talked about it since the season 2 premiere. A fantastic show, David Simon. So we're going to catch up on that. And then music's pretty light. I think Takeoff, his solo album's already coming out. Only 10 tracks, though, which is pretty great considering the history Migos has. Action Bronson might have a project coming out. Homecoming, Julia Roberts, Amazon Prime show. I still don't know if it's releasing one episode of the whole season, but we'll probably talk about the premiere. And then did not know this is coming out until a few days ago, but it's pretty cool. The Other Side of the Wind, the lost Orson Welles movie that like took years to get completed, obviously after his death, is on Netflix at the end of the week, and apparently it's pretty good. So
interesting
at some point. And then lastly, your favorite show, House of Cards. Finally, Robyn Wright is out.
And we're all out of time for today, so let's. Yeah, but if you want to hit us up at Nowstalgia Pod on Twitter, we're gonna be talking about, it sounds like, a lot of TV next week, some music and some movies. So hit us up with anything you definitely want us to get to that maybe we didn't mention. Leave a rating and review on iTunes and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We appreciate all the feedback. Don't watch House of Cards. Red Sox are world champions. We'll see you next week.